Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. On today's episode, I will be targeting catfish from the bank of Lake Camanche. I will be targeting the traditional holding areas of these catfish from the bank. So come with me today as I answer these questions of where do these catfish go during the summer period. So the first thing an angler must realize is that Lake Camanche is a lowland reservoir. So therefore, what is a lowland reservoir? A lowland reservoir typically means most of the reservoir is shallow and flat, with the exception of a few deeper areas like the dam or the river arms that feed into the reservoir. So what does this mean for the bank angler? Well, for the most part, the bank angler is limited to fishing what is in front of them. So as for the area I am targeting today, I am targeting the north shore of Lake Camanche. This area is a community fishing hole known among many of the locals, especially during the trout stocking season. So what will happen here is there is an island on the peninsula campground on the north shore. During drought years, this island will typically be connected by a peninsula and it will be adjacent to a very deep cove. However, with the high water, this cove now had become a hole, and this is the area I am going to be targeting. The point that would typically be the peninsula that reaches out to the island will normally form the bay, so this is a great area to target from the bank, especially during the summertime. Now as for the rig itself, this hole is relatively clean on the bottom with very little vegetation, so I will be fishing a traditional fish finder rig. As for the bait itself, I am using shrimp because these lowland reservoir catfish aren't as picky. As for how do I put the shrimp on the hook, all I like to do is to hook the whole shrimp because this batch of shrimp tend to be on the smaller side, so I'll hook it from the top down to the tail. I am fishing a circle hook for catch and release, but today if I were to catch a smaller catfish, I will take it home. Again, I will be fishing casting gear because during the drought year, this hole can be rather snaggy, so I don't want to lose the catfish. The first area I'm going to target in the morning is the point because there will be catfish roaming this shallow point, especially earlier in the mornings. With the golden mussel closure and the lack of pleasure boaters and fishermen out here, a bank angler should never dismiss the shallow water, especially with these points that are adjacent to these holes. There will be catfish, especially during the earlier part of the day, moving up and down onto this shallow water. I have demonstrated this style of fishing when I'm fishing at lakes in the past, such as Lake Amador. An angler should never dismiss the shallow water. However, as the sun comes up and later into the day, because today I'm only going to fish from morning till about noon due to the high temperatures that this lake will often get in the summertime, I am going to give this point about an hour of fishing time before moving onto the deeper end of the hole. I really like to target the shallow water, especially earlier in the mornings, because during the summertime there will always be some catfish hunting bluegills or smaller bait fish such as bass fingerlings as well in the shallow. Now I'm ready to fish, and while waiting on this point, the left hand rod ended up getting bit. I wasn't paying attention because I was paying attention to the number of bass fingerlings and fries that were in the shallow. I couldn't believe the amount of fish that were in the shallow, and the rod ended up doubling over, but luckily I ended up still hooking the fish. This wasn't a big channel catfish because for the most part with these lowland reservoir, if you catch a catfish of a certain size, then you can best believe that most catfish around that area will tend to be around the same size. For the most part, when it comes down to a lowland reservoir, an angler can expect to catch pretty decent channel catfish, mostly uniform around the same size. So if you are looking to eat a few catfish, a lowland reservoir such as Lake Camanche, Collins Lake, and Lake Amador. As for Clear Lake, I am not going to touch on that topic. Clear Lake had been beaten to death by so many anglers here in Northern California that there are a ton of videos out there on YouTube land for many folks to look at. This isn't exactly a really big channel catfish, but he's pretty decent for a lowland reservoir. This is about the typical size a lot of lowland reservoir around my area here in Northern California will produce. For the most part, when it comes down to a lowland reservoir, such as Lake Camanche, Lake Amador, or even Collins Lake, an angler, even with not much skills, can catch a catfish from the bank. as again, this is the telltale sign that this catfish was rummaging around the bottom, especially on the shallow point where it has a little bit of vegetation on the bottom. These catfish will dig around the vegetation for morsels of baits and small bait fish and snails alike. Again, it is not geese poop, so making that very clear for the anglers who think their catfish are eating poop. With the circle hook, I ended up hooking him in the side of the mouth, but this catfish was a little bit too big for what I like to take home. I'll show him to you guys real quick. He is very nice, very pretty, fully recovered from the spawn. When I'm going to harvest the catfish, I prefer to harvest catfish anywhere from 1 to 3 pounds, where I can get a meal out of it and without having to store it in the freezer. Alright buddy, you are one lucky guy, so off you go. Another area that the bank angler should not overlook are undercuts. Undercuts are a great area to target from the bank, especially the deeper ones. While walking out to the hole, I noticed that there was a catfish hunting this deep undercut in front of me. The water is so clear, and I knew right away that this catfish was hunting the bluegills that were around this undercut. All I did was give the bait a little pitch in front of the undercut. I am anticipating that this catfish, while hunting the bluegills underneath this deep undercut, will eventually come out and grab the bait. I don't know if you guys could see this fish, but eventually he did come out of the undercut. And he swam around to the bait, and I knew right away that he was pretty aggressive. Contrary to popular belief, catfish are apex predators and they are actively hunting as well. More times than not, a lot of anglers think that catfish will often just pick up junk from the bottom, but that is not true. For the most part, I would describe a catfish as opportunistic. They will take things off the bottom, whether dead or alive, given the opportunities, but if they have to hunt, they will hunt as well. This channel catfish was actively hunting the juvenile bluegills and bass that were hiding underneath this undercut, but with my bait in the way, he ultimately decided that he wanted a piece of the shrimp. So with that being said, it is really cool that I was able to watch him take the bait. I ended up getting him on, and this was a very nice channel catfish. He's not big compared to some of the other lakes that will produce bigger channel catfish like Lake Berryessa or Clear Lake, but it was just really cool to watch him take off with the bait in front of me in this super clear water. Again, these catfish will tend to do these death rolls, but because I caught him so close to the bank, he didn't give much of a fight. This is definitely a post-spawn male channel catfish. He is long, lean, and skinny, probably trying to recover from all those weeks of guarding the fries. I ended up hooking him in the side of the mouth, and I'll show him to you guys real quick. This fish is a little bit too big for me to retain because I am looking for a fish that's just small enough that I can get a complete fish fry in one meal from. So he is one lucky fellow. Alright dude, you are lucky you are not the size I want to harvest today. Off you go. So now I'm going to demonstrate how to target the hole that is in front of me. As for how do I know where the hole is, I can see the island and the peninsula where if the water were to be low would form the bay. However, with the high water, the hole is in front of me now because with the bay being shallow where the peninsula is, I don't want to target that area because that is where the point is and I've already targeted that for the first hour in the morning. The most difficult thing about targeting these deeper holes, however, are the bite window. When it comes down to channel catfish in general, sometimes if you're not there during the bite window, despite the hole having fish, the catfish will often not feed if it's not within their feeding window. I am going to wait this area out for the last hour and a half before calling it quits for the day because the temperature is just unbearable. The left hand rod did end up getting bit and this catfish was rather lethargic. Now some angler might be asking me, how deep is this hole then? What makes it so special that there are fish holding here? Well, in my opinion, especially with these lowland reservoirs, which could be rather flat from the bank, all it will take is just an irregular depth change that will often be deeper than its surrounding features, and that will hold catfish. These areas, more times than not, will hold everything a catfish need to hunker out the rest of their summer. There will always be some catfish hunting the shallow, especially around the morning, evenings, and night, but for the most part during the daytime, if an angler were to find an area, success can be had from the bank, despite the weather temperature being extremely warm. This wasn't a really big channel catfish, but he was just a little bit too big for my liking to take home. Again, as I've already mentioned, when I'm taking channel catfish home, I really like to just take a fish where I can make one meal out of the fish instead of having leftovers in the freezer. The circle hook ended up hooking him on the bottom of the jaw, but that's okay. I'm not going to retain this fish, so I'll show him to you guys real quick before prepping him for release. With this clear water, these channel catfish are gorgeous in my opinion. They have this tint of gray and blue on top, unlike those reservoirs where I often get them out of dingy, murky water where they'll be completely yellow. Again, I'm not going to retain this guy, so he is one lucky fellow. Off you go, dude. The left hand rod ended up getting bit again as I was preparing to get ready to go home for the day. The weather was just unbearable, especially at these lakes where there are little to no shade. I ended up picking up the rod and I knew right away that this probably was a fish that I can take home. This fish didn't fight really hard, but I knew right away from the telltale sign that it was a channel catfish from the death rolls. So hopefully today's episode demonstrate my take on how to target these traditional catfish holding grounds in the summer. A bank angler is limited to fishing what is in front of them, so by having a little bit of knowledge about your reservoir, whether it be a natural lake, a little pond, a lowland reservoir, or a highland reservoir, an angler can indeed target these fish successfully from the bank. These fish can definitely be caught successfully from the bank during the summertime. However, if you were to have a lot of pleasure boaters, as I've demonstrated in the previous episode at Lake Berryessa, it can definitely turn off the bite. You can definitely target these fish at night as well, but I don't have that kind of luxury to fish at night because as a content creator, I don't want to shoot where a lot of angler can't really see anything but me just reeling in a fish and showing you guys a fish at the end. This is the perfect size channel catfish I like to take home. This fish is roughly about 2 pounds and I can get a nice little meal out of it without any leftovers. Again, I am not very fond of taking really big fish because I really don't like to freeze the fish afterward. I will bleed this fish and prep him to take home. Overall, it was just a nice little morning to afternoon session. Caught a few catfish before the heat cranked up and it got too hot. But hopefully today's episode demonstrate that these fish can be taken from the bank successfully with a little bit of knowledge. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time, tight lines y'all.